All right, good morning everyone, or good afternoon. Today we're going to have a talk about, in our webcast, about the Yom Tovs, the holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I'm going to zero in on a specific topic, and that is the prayers of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I'll preface it with a question. And I get this question all the time. People tell me, Rabbi, when I come to shul, the Yom Kippur prayer book is full of requests for my personal needs. The Rosh Hashanah prayer book. For money, for health, all kinds of things. And what people like to tell me all the time is that they don't feel that that is what they want to spend their high holidays thinking about. It's a little sacrilegious, if you will, to ask God for money. They'd rather ask for health, understanding, the more important things in life, the more spiritual things in life. Why spend Yom Kippur on such crass, coarse requests as money? And when you think about it, first of all, has that question ever come up in your own mind? Have you ever thought in those terms? Because I hear it a lot. People say, I don't want to ask God for money. That's not something I want to ask for. So I want to speak about that for a moment. When you look at this question that they ask superficially, it looks like a valid question, especially when you recognize that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are, what is Rosh Hashanah? What is the essence theme of Rosh Hashanah? And it's also in the prayer book very much emphasized, the idea of crowning God as our king, making him the sovereign of the universe. And we ask that he should be king and that he should be a ruler of the world and everyone should accept him and everyone should know him and so on and so forth. And that's one of the things that we are, and that's why we blow the shofar as well. That's because when you make a king, you install him into his position as king. You blow trumpets, you blow horns, you make a whole commotion. So that's the idea. So if that's the case, then seemingly they would be right. The last thing you want to be thinking about is your own personal needs. When you're crowning a king, what is needed is total submission, where the people, the subjects crowning this king, don't feel themselves at all, are not focused on their own personal selfish agendas at all. The whole focus should be on the king himself. So to ask for money, or I'd go a step further, even asking for anything personal is sacrilege. Is not in the right place. That should come later, a few weeks later. But when you're focused on making God the king, the only thing you should be thinking about is God. Not yourself. Because that's the idea of making a king. A king is where the subjects are completely nullified. They submit completely to total submission. It's where you're thinking about yourself. It can be even a what we would call a what's the word I'm looking for? It goes against. It's a rebellion almost. On the day that you're crowning me, you're thinking about yourself, you should be thinking about me. So thinking about yourself would be a rebellion. Would be a rebellious request. So the question is, how is it that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where we're supposed to be thinking only about God as the king and making him the king of the universe, we are so caught up with our personal requests, not only for health, but even for money and parnasa and for everything that we can think of. And some of the most important prayers of these days, such as the prayer where we talk about, where we say, who shall live and who shall die, that famous prayer that we read out loud and we stand and we have the ark open. It's a pivotal point of the day. And over there again, what are we thinking about? Only ourselves almost. So how do you reconcile this contradiction? So I'll share with you the story that we read on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. We read about the Haftorah, in the Haftorah of that day, we read about the story of the famous prophet Samuel, and the circumstances of his birth, how he came to be born. You've heard of the prophet Samuel, certainly. He was the first of the Jewish prophets. And the story goes that his mother and father used to go to the temple. Then the temple wasn't yet in Jerusalem, it was in a place called Shiloh. The temple between, when the Jews got to Israel, till they built the temple was 400 years, approximately. So for 369 of those years, they built a stone temple in the city of Shiloh. It's what today would be somewhere in the West Bank. So she used to come there every year, as the commandment is, she and her husband and her family. But she was barren. She had no children. This woman's name was Chana. And she would come every year and she would pray, she would beg for children, but she was never answered. One year she came and she prayed really, really hard. And she came into the temple, I believe she was standing at the door of the temple. And as the prophet, as the Torah, as the Bible describes it, the high priest at the time was a man by the name of Eli. And he saw this woman Chana praying. What he saw was that her mouth was moving, but there was no audible prayer. He didn't hear anything. And I guess she was praying in such a way that made him think that she was intoxicated. So he accused her of being intoxicated and he chastised her. He said, why don't you leave out a bottle? What kind of business is it coming to the temple drunk? And what's with you? And so on. And what she answered him was that I'm not drunk at all. I'm not drunk at all. I am actually praying for a child. And she went ahead and said that God willing, if I made a pledge today to God during my prayer, that if He gives me a child, I want Him to give me a child, and I plan to dedicate him to the temple for his whole life. That means that as soon as he is able to be on his own, a couple of years old, I plan to bring him here to be dedicated to the temple for the rest of his life. When Eli heard this, I don't know if he apologized, but he kind of accepted what she said and blessed her himself. And the story goes that she had a child that year, and this child was the famous prophet Shmuel, and she nursed him for 2 years. After he was weaned from nursing, she brought him to the temple indeed, and he lived in the temple till he was his whole life, basically, till he became the prophet and so on. That is the story. And from this story we learn a very important lesson. The lesson that we learn from this story is, and we read this on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. So the prayers of Rosh Hashanah are modeled in a similar fashion as that prayer of Chana. What is the point of this story? He accuses her of being drunk. First of all, question number one. Even if you did accuse her of being drunk, is that a nice thing to write in the prophets? And the Bible has to, for thousands of years, we have to hear the story that Chana was accused of being drunk. Why would the Torah even put that in there? It's not a nice thing to say about her, even if it was true. Why would you disparage someone? They did something wrong. Why put it in there? Why even talk about that? And of course the answer is that Eli did not suspect that she was drunk in the literal sense, that she drank too much wine and she got drunk and she was in a bar and she came to the temple to let loose. Of course that's not what he was suspecting her of. What he suspected her was the following. He said to her, you're coming to the temple of God. You're praying to God. He said, you're drunk in prayer, meaning, how could it be that you are asking for something for yourself when you're standing in such a holy place, in front of God, in the holiest place on earth, where God's presence is felt all day long, you can experience it, and you're thinking about selfish personal requests? This is the place for that. He accused her of exactly what I was just talking about, the Rosh Hashanah prayers. How do you have the audacity to think about yourself and pray for your own needs, even if it's a child? In a place like this, on a holiday. What did she answer? In other words, he was saying, you're drunk with yourself, you're intoxicated, I mean, you're thinking only about yourself. Even if it's a good request. It's yourself, it's self-centered. It's not the place, not the time. That's what he accused her. What did she answer? I'm not thinking about myself at all. Yes, I'm asking for it for the fruit of my womb. But why am I asking for it? This child that comes from my womb, the issue of my womb, I plan to bring right back to the temple, so he's dedicated to God his whole life. It's not about me at all, it's about God. It looks personal, but you didn't hear everything I said. I'm planning to bring this child right back here, so I'm asking for a child. We're asking for money. Well, what's our intent to do with that money? What is the intent to do with that health? What is our intent to do with our nachas? It's to do something constructive, something impactful. To make an impact in the world. That's what Chana told Eli. And he accepted, and therefore he gave her a tremendous blessing, which ended up helping and worked, and she had a child. Then indeed she brought it back to the temple as soon as she was able to. And that is the answer, my friends, to the question of the prayers on Rosh Hashanah. When you ask for God, when you stand in front of God on the high holy days, and you ask, and you ask, and you ask for this, and for that, and for the other, what is the intent? Is it really a selfish agenda? It could be, and then it would maybe be out of place. But it doesn't have to be. The asking for health and money and all the needs that we focus on does not have to be self-centered. It could be, and it should be this way, that you ask God for help to provide for you what you need so that you can then use those things to promote his kingdom in the world. In other words, it goes hand in hand with the whole theme of Rosh Hashanah. What is Rosh Hashanah again? To crown God as the king. What is a king? What does it mean, crown God as the king? What does it mean, God's a king? What does that exactly mean? What is it that we're trying to accomplish on Rosh Hashanah with crowning God as the king? To make the knowledge of God and his program or his agenda known to the whole world, so that the whole world can fall under his sovereignty, his dominance. That's what we want. That's what we're seeking on on Rosh Hashanah. So when we turn around at the same time and say, God, I need money, and I need health, and I need a house, and I need a job, and I need whatever, it's not about myself. All of a sudden I'm focused on myself instead of God. It could be the same focus on God. I want to make you the king. In order for me to make you a king of the whole universe, I need certain things to make that happen. I need some money, I need some health. I'm sick in the hospital, I can't promote your kingdom. If I don't have what to eat, I can't promote your kingdom. If I'm busy all day with anxiety about a job, how can I promote your kingdom? So all these requests become about God's kingdom. We are asking him for all these needs in order to use that to make an impact in the world, to make God a greater king in this world. So none of that is selfish at all. Now is another point. This is something I said on Shabbos to my community. As we were just talking about it, the economy right now is so much on our mind. And most people, I don't know the numbers, but many people are now concerned about their needs more than they ever were. I think most people, and we just mentioned, people are downsizing. Even if they don't have to, they're downsizing. They're starting to live on less. People are starting to realize that what they thought they need, they don't need. You can live on less. I think the focus by most people today is, God, please give me what I need, not so much what I want anymore. I want and want and want. But in the past, we used to just look for what we want and more and more and more. Today, we're more focused on what we need. We realize that whatever we wanted, we don't really necessarily need. We're learning to live on less. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, there's maybe a silver lining in it all. It is a fact. We're living on less. We're more focused on needs rather than wants, than extras. We're happy if we get by with what we really need. So I told my community this week. I said, if we're focused on what we need anyway, and we're less focused on what we want, let's then take that and think about utilizing what we need in an impactful way. Because when you think about what you need, not so much what you want, you're not so self-centered anyway. It's less about yourself, it's more about life. When a person asks for a good job so he can provide for his family, is that selfish? No. It's less selfish than when a person asks for a big 90-foot cruise, a 90-foot yacht. No one needs it. You don't need it. You just want it because it's nice, it's exciting, it's fun.
Because you can show off to your neighbor.
Because you can show off to your neighbor, whatever the reason is. People are not asking for that anymore. It's not in anyone's mind anymore. What are they asking? They're asking more to get by. So they're less self-centered. They're more centered on the necessities of life. It's an opportune time to take that a step further. To think about being impactful in this world. To make an impact. And that would be a great blessing for this year. That this year, what I do get, it should be utilized to promote, like Chana. I'm not asking this for myself, I'm asking this to be able to promote a kinder society, a better society, a holier society, a more God-conscious society. To dedicate ourselves a little bit more towards that goal. But let me share with you one other idea. When someone says to me, this is not so much related, but it's true anyway. When someone says, I don't want to bother God with such basic, give me money. It's not the right thing to ask for. I believe truly that thought process stems from heresy. A little heresy. You know why I say that? It's almost like saying, when you say like that, when someone tells you, in Kippur I'm not going to bother God for money. He's not saying I don't need money. He's not saying I don't want money. He wants money and he needs money. He needs a livelihood. So why not bother God? What he's saying is, that I'll take care of myself. I don't need God for that. Let me ask God for the big things, the things that I really need Him for. That's heresy. You can't make 1 cent without God allowing it to happen. You can't make out 1 day without God allowing it to happen, without the assistance of God. And this is something we need to remember. What do you mean you don't want to ask for it? Who then are you going to ask for it? Is there another source, another power in this world that can provide you other than God? What does it mean, the words, I don't want to bother God for money? Where are you going to get it from? From some other source? Where is that other source? It strikes heresy if you think about it. In other words, either you say, I don't need any source for that. I can rely on my own brains for that. That's also a little bit heresy. Because what you're saying is that your parnasa, your livelihood, is strictly your own. It's like we said before. You wake up in the morning, you'll make a living, and you go work, and if you don't, you won't. That's true, to a certain extent. What's more true is that God is going to provide for your living if you do what you have to do. Sure, if you're going to sleep and protest and lay on the beach, you're not going to get anything. Money's not going to fly through your window. God wants the money to fly to you, to get to you. But He set up the world in such a way where that channel, the pipeline, is through a job. And if you're not going to have a job, you're not going to have a pipeline. But where does the water come from? It's like saying the pipe gave me money. Yeah, the pipe gave me water. Do you hear Mishugas? Anyone would say such a thing? The pipe gave me money. The water. So where do you get that cup of water from the pipe? The pipe gives water. There's a source, there's a well, there's a reservoir of water with it. It's only flowing through the pipe to get to you. So to say, a person should say, my money comes from my business. Your business is a pipe, that's all it is. Where the money's flowing into that pipe from? From God. It's a very important thing, and that's why in Rosh Hashanah you must. Part of our request has to be for this, parnosa, for a good livelihood, for a good market, for a good business, for a good day in business, for a good year. Because you cannot get it from anywhere else, trust me. People tell me, they come to me and say, Rabbi, I don't know what's wrong. Everything I put my hands to goes sour. I used to be so successful. I said, what the heck happened? He become stupid in his old age. He knows how to run a business. Why is it not going for him? Very simple. Because God doesn't want it to happen. Why? I don't know. Don't ask me why. You're providing a pipe. It's just the water in the reservoir ran out. It's not there. It's like you put a pipe from a dry field. You're not going to get water. The God's mazel for you turned. Mazel means your luck, I don't know if the right word is not luck. It's something else. In other words, there's no other place you can seek the blessing for a good parnasa, a good livelihood, other than God Himself. He's the channel. He's the source. The channel you can make, you have this kind of channel, whether you used to work in advertising, right? Or someone used to work in advertising. This one works in shmatas. This one works in real estate. Those are all pipes, channels. Where's the blessing come from? That comes from God. Therefore, a person says, I don't want to bother God with this. What do you mean you don't want to bother God with? Who are you going to bother for? Where else are you going for this? It's a terrible mistake. It's kind of it's a statement saying, I can do this on my own. And Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah forewarns us never to make that mistake. You cannot do anything like that. And in other words, a person shouldn't make the mistake thinking, the strength of my hands has created me this wealth. He was worried that Jews would fall into that trap thinking, we're so successful, we do so well, we have a business that's running, it's great. He says, I'm warning you. Don't ever think that it's your hands and the power of your might that brought you this success, this wealth. Yes, you have to open up a channel, a business, and work hard. But the strength and the wealth comes from God. And therefore on Rosh Hashanah, when the whole world is returning back, or the whole world is being set in motion again for another year, that is the day that you have to think about these things and ask Hashem for these things, but with the thought that it should be impact. I should be able to make a positive impact with these blessings. That shouldn't just be about me, it should be about God's kingdom and God's sovereignty. So that I can use my money, I can use my health, my resources, my time, and all the good things that God gives me to channel right back into His direction. And that's the prayer of Chana. That's the story of Chana, and that's why we read it in Rosh Hashanah. We read it also because she was remembered. It said that she conceived on Rosh Hashanah. She was remembered by God for a blessing for children on Rosh Hashanah. But there's a great lesson there. The whole idea of prayer we learn from her prayer. Prayer is not selfish. The prayer for money and saying God is the king is exactly the same thing if you think about it. If your money is about channeling it right back into the direction of God's kingdom. So that we give charity and we use it for good things, we educate our children properly, and so on and so forth. And even the 90% that we don't give away to charity, that we keep for ourselves, even that should be utilized in a holy, in a proper, in a Jewish, in a human, in a honest and so on way. And that's the promotion of God's kingdom. What is God's kingdom if not for that? When we talk about God becoming the king, it's you got to bring it down to the level to our level. What does it mean to me? And I asked this question last week to someone. You said, God, you're going to talk about God's kingdom. What does that mean? What does it mean to you a day after Rosh Hashanah, or even on Rosh Hashanah? What does it mean? You want God to be a king. I showed him 2 pages in the Machzor. I said, read this. I said, you say this every year. You're going to say it again tomorrow, before Rosh Hashanah. So what does this mean to you? How does this relate to anything in your life? And the person was a little bit like taken. He was like speech. I caught him off guard. He was speechless. He didn't really know what it means. I mean, he knows what the words mean. God should be king or something. I said, what is it? Well, is there any part? Do you have to do anything for it? Sometimes we talk about ideas, lofty ideas that remain in the lofty spheres. We never bring it down. Okay, what does it mean to me? What do I do about this now? Is there anything I have to do for this? And the answer is we learn from Chana, yes. You're going to have a child, that's a beautiful blessing for you. Use that child. Promote God's kingdom with that child. You're going to get a good livelihood. You're going to make $1 million this year, 500, whatever it is, halavai. You're going to make a parnasa. Use that money, literally that money, to promote God's kingdom. By giving 10%, by using the other 90% for your own needs, but in a positive direction. It means something. These things mean something. So when you ask for all these things, who's going to live, who's going to die, who by this, who by that, who rich, who poor, and all that, you're saying in a different language, God is king. Because with all that blessing I'm going to use, and you have to channel it. Know how to channel it. I want to bless you all. Hashem should give you a wonderful year. And everyone listening online should be blessed with a happy and a healthy new year. And an impactful one. One where you realize that the needs that you have, God has the same needs. God wants you and is waiting for us to utilize what He gives us right back to Him. And I'll tell you a story before I conclude, which is very much related to this topic. There was a Yid, there was a Jew, I believe he was from a not Lubavitch Hasidic group, a very orthodox group, and he belonged to a Hasidic, but not Lubavitch. And if my memory serves me correctly, he was like he had a job, he was a professional, he was like either an electrician or a plumber, and he had a skill. And he winded up doing work by the Rebbe's house. That's just how it happened. So he got a job at the Rebbe's house to fix something. And the Rebbe was there. He finished his work. So he decided, I'm in the Lubavitch Rebbe's house. I'm not going out of here without asking him, to utilize these great moments that I had. So he asked the Rebbe if the Rebbe can tell him a Dvar Torah, something that he can go home with. So I don't know if the Rebbe asked him back, how the conversation flowed, but I'll tell you what the Rebbe told him. He says we say in the prayers on Shabbos, and we say it on Rosh Hashanah also. Give me that siddur over there. I just want to read it. Give me the siddur, please. We say on Shabbos, there's a prayer that's called the Nishmas prayer. It's a very soulful, beautiful prayer. And we say it, and this is what we say. We talk about the greatness that God, all the kind things that God has done for us. And then we say like this. Even if our mouth, listen to these words, even if our mouth were filled with song, as the sea is filled with water, our tongue our tongue with melody as the roar of its waves, and our lips with praise as the breadth of the firmament, and our eyes were radiant like the sun and the moon, and so on and so forth. And our hands spread out like the wings of the eagles of the sky, and our feet as swift as the deer, we would still be unable to thank you, Lord our God, and God of our fathers, and bless your name for even one of the innumerable myriads of favors and great things that you've done for us. That means we're saying basically we can't praise you, we can't thank you for anything you do for us. We're just insignificant. We have nothing. But then just a few lines later, we say, after we go on and say we are nothing, then we say, and therefore, the limbs which you have arranged within us, the spirit and soul which you have breathed into our nostrils, and the tongue which you have placed in our mouth, and the eyes and all, they all shall thank, bless, praise, and glorify, exalt, and adore, hallow, and proclaim the sovereignty of your name, our King. The Rebbe said this is a contradiction. A few lines earlier said we are insignificant, we can't even begin to say your praises. If our eyes were like the sun and the moon, we wouldn't be able to see. And then just 2-3 lines later, we say, and therefore our hands and our eyes and our spirit and our tongue, they're the ones that will praise you. What does that mean? We're contradicting ourselves. So the Rebbe answered the contradiction. He said like this, I'll tell you a story, a parable. He said there was once a king that got lost in the forest. He went on a trip and he got lost his way. And for days now he's alone and he's out of food and out of clothing. He's destitute. And he's literally on his last strength. But thank God he sees, after a long time, he sees a little light coming from a distance. And he makes his way over there. And it's a little hut, a little house there. And he goes, knocks on the door. Out comes a old, a man that lives there, a farmer. And the king tells him, I am the king. I got lost, and I'm asking you for help. Here's the king is in his midst. He takes him in, and he gives him a bed, and he says, I don't have much of a bed to give you. What do I have? It's a little house that I have, but I'll give you what I have, the best. And he cooks him up a meager meal, and he brings him back to life. It takes a few days. He's living with him, and he becomes he's fully healthy now, the king, and he's ready to go back to his palace. So he tells the person of this house, he says, give me your name, all your information, because I want to reward you. I really want to show my appreciation. So he gives him his information, his name. The king leaves. And a little while later, a messenger from the palace arrives at this house, and he brings him a gift. What's the gift? It's a goblet, a beautiful goblet that's very meaningful to the king. He said, I want you to always remember me and my gratitude to you. Here's this gift. He receives the gift, he puts it up on a high place, protected. And he does, he lives his life. Many years go by. And now the king is going on another trip. And he figures, you know what? Let me go visit this man that saved me many years ago. So he sends a messenger again to this person saying the king is going to be visiting you in a week. Oh, the king is coming, so he prepares the house and makes it clean, and he does his best. But he starts thinking to himself, the king is coming to my house, I have to present him with some kind of a gift, something. So what in the world am I going to give the king? What am I going to give him? My horse? What do I have to give him? He's thinking maybe this, maybe that. Nothing is significant. And now he doesn't know what to do. And it's already the day the king is coming. The king's at his doorstep. King comes inside. How are you? And he welcomes him. He gives him. Yeah. And then it dawned on him. I know what I'm going to give him as a gift. He's saying the very goblet that he sent me that was so meaningful to him, I'm going to give that back to him. That's going to be the gift I'm going to give him. What else could I give him? That's a royal goblet. I'll give him a royal king who deserves a royal item. So the Rebbe told this man, he says, that's exactly what this prayer is. Well, we're saying to God that we don't have anything to give you. What are we going to say about your greatness? To extol for all the greatness that you've given us. Where do we begin to even talk? Our eyes are insignificant, our ears are insignificant, our hands, our feet, like all we read. You know, if our eyes were like the sun and the moon, it would be nothing compared to you, God. What? A few lines later, what do we say? We remind ourselves that the very limbs that we are saying are insignificant from our perspective, but those are the limbs that God gave us. Those are the limbs that God instilled in us. Those are the limbs that we got as the goblet that God gave you. Therefore, we're going to give it right back to you. The eyes that you gave us, and the hands that you gave us, and the ears that you instilled in our body, they'll be the ones to extol you and to praise you and to talk about you and so on and so forth. That's the point of this prayer that we read on about Chana. Chana is saying that I'm asking for a child. It's not an insignificant thing. It's not self-centered. It's the limbs that God gave us. That's what we're going to give right back to him. The money that he's going to give us, that's what I'm asking to give right back. To make an impact. To utilize for God's kingdom. It's not selfish. It's what God gave us. That's what we're asking for. We're asking for you to give us these things so that we can give it right back to you. What else could we give you? To make your sovereignty felt and known in this world, we take those limbs and that finances and that health and that not all that we have, and we present it right back to you and gear it and channel it in a direction that is godly. And that promotes God's kingdom in the world. That was the ultimately the greatest gift that this person could give the king. What else could he give? That which he received from the king himself. So Hashem should help that we should all receive great gifts and kindness of Hashem in an open and revealed way, and that we should be smart enough to make a U-turn with all of that and redirect it right back into God's court, so that his sovereignty and his kingdom could become promoted and expanded and known by us and by our families and by extension by the whole world around us. Achsima and Gemar Chasima Teva, you should be all sealed for a good and healthy year. Thank you.